thanks to Lucy and the organisers for having us. If we're no good, you can't have your money back. Come on. Now, it would be ridiculous to charge for this event because the doors are locked once the last person comes in. Nobody leaves without a copy of the anthology. But this is all about Tea Haven, and I'm sure you know about Tea Haven. Some of you may have been there. I have. It's not an easy place to go to, but it's a place that we vitally have to keep going. Tea Haven should be completely funded by the government. It isn't. About 4 years ago, Margaret and I went to the funeral of an 8-year-old girl who was the granddaughter of a guy I'd played squash with years ago. And it was Peterson Super Ely, and it was drenching with rain. And there were about 300 people outside of this church. And it all seemed, I mean, if you're going to have a funeral, yes, it should be like that. It should be pouring with rain. But it shouldn't be an 8-year-old. And I thought, hang on, this is not right. And of course it's not right. The world isn't right. But people at Tea Haven do something about that. They help life-limited children and, importantly, their parents and siblings to get through what is not going to be a happy journey. It's a remarkable place run by remarkable people. Now, you probably think that I'm 33. I'm a bit older than that, and I'm too old to run a marathon, and I'm sure as hell not going to jump out of a plane on a bungee or anything. So what can I do to help? Well, as a writer, I thought, let's put an anthology together. And that's where the birds sing our name comes from. And the title comes from what they do, one of the things they do in Tea Haven. When a child passes on, the parents are offered a bird song to sound out their names. And Christopher, and that is played on the loop in the rather wonderful garden, just the other side of the coastal path and just a few hundred yards from the Bristol Channel. That's played in the garden at Tea Haven. So in thinking of a title for this, that suggested itself. And they were happy for that to be the title. This is not a downer. What happens in Tea Haven, what happens to these kids is, but the book isn't. And when I wrote to people and phoned people and got on the case with people, I said, look, don't send me poems about dying or being down around. Let's have poems about parenting and childhood in an uplifting way. Yes, poems are often poignant, but you should come out of a poem having moved somewhere, well, into a better place. I'm delighted to have Rhyn Edwards again, who joined us in Lantwit not long ago, and Jonathan Edwards, both major contributors to this anthology. We will read the poems that we've got in the anthology, and we will read some others of our choosing. So you're going to get a variety of things. Possibly also, my wife Margaret will come and read a couple of poems as well from the anthology, from people we know. It's got an introduction by Baroness Finlay of Llandaff, who is the end-of-life expert in Wales and in the House of Lords arguing for those things. And also an introduction by Maria Timon Samra, the director of Tea Haven. And then my introduction, which I'm not going to read, obviously turns into a poem. Where the birds sing our names. When the children pass on, their names are put into Morse code, dot and dash. And the parents choose a songbird, robin, blackbird, wren, and thrush. These name notes are played as you pass each tree in the woods around Tea Haven, the house haven. Bird sings to bird across the land, a chain of notes until the trees end and the oceans begin. Then they fly beyond. So imitative birds pass on these name notes of song against the murmurings of the sea. It's some kind of immortality. can I introduce, I'm not going to say we're all prize-winning poets, because, you know, everyone has a prize, but they are all prize-winning poets. Can I introduce Ryan Edwards?
Thank you. I'm going to do Gwyneth Lewis's contribution to this anthology called Splinter, and it's for Finley, aged 3. Can you hear me okay? Yeah. Splinter. In years to come, they will lodge in his heart. It won't be me with a sterilized pin, dislodging dashes of wooden rain aslant in his soul. He says it doesn't hurt. I don't believe him. One fragment stubborn, dig deeper. If I were a mosquito, I'd anesthetize his novice skin before each stab, and then I'd suck with more conviction and no less zeal than Helen, mother of Constantine, who scoured the length and breadth of Christendom for a piece of the real cross. Got it. Kiss his lyrical skin. I'm now going to do a poem by, I know her as Tammy, so I'm going to call her Tammy Yosloff. She's Tamar. Is it Tamar? Is that how you pronounce it?
No, Tammy.
It's Tammy. It's Tammy. Little black dress. All the women here have been here. Too tight, too short. It weathered nights on the lash with my broken spine plath, my Bacardi and Coke, a classic LBD from Bendel's or Saks, sole owner deceased, her closet dispatched to the charity shop, where we picked over Da Vinci like vultures. My wardrobe belonged to the dead, le smoking in sharkskin, a boucle vest with leopard lapels that died for my sins, which were minor enough to dress for the part, Rachmaninoff oozing through speakers, the record skipping into dusk, and us, university girls with daddies and trusts, drunk and disorderly, dropping off bar stools one by one, until the time arrives for widows' weeds and weeping veils, Ray-Bans darkening the sun. And now I will do my own contribution. This was the only poem I wrote during lockdown, and this is for all the parents who homeschooled. And there is no way they were learning that much at school. That's all I can say. We had like 8 hours worth of schooling a day. It was obscene. But I think all of you can remember, so I think it was it the 22nd of March 2020? And it was an incredible spring, wasn't it? For some reason, the weather, this incredible weather came from nowhere. And this is called Forever Parked. Are those the Sunday bells I hear, as clear as themselves? In 10 years of Sunnyside living, my ears have never made your acquaintance. Is it a renegade bell ringer ticking off the bucket list at a congregationless service? Never have I inhabited the outside world of my back garden like this, under pandemic house arrest, in the thick of a spring that is outdoing itself. My decking has become the French Riviera. My postage stamp garden is now a playroom, obstacle course, a classroom. The water table and sandpit are centre parks for Barbie. I've decluttered my shed not once but twice. The decorator's table is forever assembled, paint-splattered, Play-Doh caked. The push bikes dusted off, tyres resuscitated. Regard the latest edition of the fire pit, how it devoured the Christmas tree that leaned against the rotting Wendy house like a drunk. Is it my imagination, or are there more butterflies, bees, birdsong? The picnic blanket is a magic carpet, forever parked, unless the journeys are essential. But aren't they always? Thank you.
I was glad that Rian chose a poem by Tammy Yosloff, who was one of my postgrads at the University of Glamorgan. I don't know what it's called this year. I think it's University of South Wales at the moment. It used to be the School of Mines. I liked it when it was the School of Mines. And Tammy Yosloff has run the poetry school in London and is really making waves and is about to make some more waves, which you'll hear about shortly. So there's some very good poets in here. Jonathan Edwards.
Hiya everyone. I'm reading this poem on behalf of Chris Meredith, who was supposed to be here at the event. So if you are all members of the Chris Meredith fan club and that's why you're here, I'm really sorry he's not here, but I'll do my best to read it for him. It's incumbent on poets, really, if they're going to be too ill to make an event, to make up an illness that's really sexy, you know, in the great history of alcoholic and cigar smoking poets. So in that tradition, Chris has got bad teeth, so he couldn't make this event, so apologies for that. But this poem is by him. He's a beautiful, beautiful person and a beautiful poet, so I'll try and do this poem justice. This is called Air Camera. Smile, you said, on the mountain top. By the windbreak cairn, we built stone by scavenged stone. Cocked thumbs and index fingers framed the centre of your face. A middle finger clicked a piece of air. That's one for my memory bank, you said, so accidentally filed it into mine. And was it half our lives ago, a two-shot of the boys standing absurdly close and stiff, with comedy smudge-box smiles, hair out sideways in the wind, and all around the stonework of the clouds and heaping. This poem is by Stephen Knight. One of the joys of an event like this is you get to read other people's poems, which I don't do that often. That makes it sound as though I sit around my house all the time reading my own poems, which would be a bit weird, but I mean to an audience. This is a wonderful poem, I think, by Stephen Knight, about childhood and about fatherhood. It's called Where the Circus Is Now, and it's about those moments after a circus has left town. Where the circus is now. In this bare field, my daughter stands to show me where the lions roared, the dents their cages made still visible, the tracks a worried lion tamer left behind. And here, she says, the bareback riders rode their horses round the ring, then points to where they galloped. And this, she says, is where I sat. The shops take last month's posters down. The grass is worn to nothing, here and there, though where we are, new blades come through, and there my daughter is, her head tipped back to face the sky, showing me how the lions roared. This third poem is by Jackie Kay, the Scottish poet. I think this is an amazing poem. It's about COVID and an experience of COVID where her mum is in a care home and she's talking to her on the phone. And that kind of experience and that distance from loved ones that happened during COVID. So this is called Still. So still, so still, 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 my mother says, down the line from Glasgow, as if from her care home window she sees the eerie worry of the world, the chill, the deserted squares, the empty streets, the half-shut bars, sad theatres, packed hospitals, gold dust ventilators, school kids in lockdown, no exams to meet. The whole world is going down, she said, and I'm not going to hell. Well, still, we'll have to take each day, be grateful, thankful for small mercies, the 3 crows on the wall. See the silver linings till we meet again, she said. Yes, I said, but she couldn't hear a single thing I said, except when I shouted, I love you. I love you, precious, she said. Then the line went dead.
Jonathan read a poem by Jackie Kay. There are 4 national poets in this anthology. Gillian Clarke and Gwyneth Lewis, Jackie Kay from Scotland, and the wonderful Michael Longley from Ireland. I'll read, there are 2 poems in here about my 2 granddaughters. I have 5 grandchildren, well, the one was not a child anymore. In fact, this one isn't a child anymore. This is Megan when she was very, very small. And they have terrible misfortune to live in England, across the water from us. And she came visiting to us when we lived in Barry. And it was Christmas and it snowed. It doesn't snow in the Welsh Riviera, does it? It doesn't snow, but it doesn't snow down there. And so she'd not seen snow before, which is wonderful, isn't it? How do you deal with this stuff that's all around you that wasn't there yesterday, probably not going to be there tomorrow? How do you deal with it? How do you explain that? It's a magical moment which I try to capture in Megan's first snow. Snow came floating through the black night, your side of the channel, our side. So here this morning, that dusting on our lawn has settled in the corners of the garden, crisp and tightening in the sun. Not enough left now to make a shroud or a marriage sheet. But that patch beneath the privet could be a gentleman's handkerchief. Yes, I have decided for us, such token white shall be a gentleman's handkerchief. Our code for what remains of snow. One of the things only you and I know. The whole point of being a grandparent, of course, is to, as subtly as possible, steal the children from their parents. You know, the parents get in the way. We don't see enough of them. And so that's the subtext of that little poem, you know. Let's have some things that are, you know, just ours. Megan's now 19 and doing civil engineering in Leeds. So she'll see a bit of snow up there probably. I'm going to read a poem by one of the better known poets, writers in this anthology. In fact, he's the most famous writer in Wales. I'm referring, of course, to Maxwell Boyce. And Max Boyce, during the lockdown, which has been referred to already, which was traumatic for so many of us. I mean, how do we get through that? Some of us didn't, or some of us still haven't. But, you know, the two really, I mean, this is packed full of really great poets, but the two most famous people I contacted came back like that. Rowan Williams, former Archbishop, poem, straight back. Max Boyce, straight back. And that's the power of T. Haven. Nobody says no to T. Haven. I'll try and do this justice. Oh, he's about to go on tour again, isn't he? So popular, they've added another date. He's amazing. He's even older than me, and he's filling places bigger than this, you know, huge places. The Millennium Centre in Cardiff and so on. So this is Max's take, his inimitable take on the COVID lockdown. When just the tide went out. Last night, as I lay sleeping, when dreams came fast to me, I dreamt I saw Jerusalem beside a tideless sea. And one dream I remember, as the stars began to fall, was Banksy painting Alan Wynne on my neighbour's garage wall. And dreams like that sustain me till these darkest times have passed, and chase away the shadows no caring night should cast. But times like this can shine a light as hardship often can, to see the best in people and the good there is in man. And I remember Swansea with nobody about when the shops were closed like Sunday and just the tide went out. And I remember Mumbles with the harbour in its keep and the fishing boats at anchor that trawl the waters deep. And I heard the seabirds calling as the gulls all wheeled about, but all the town was sleeping now and just the tide went out. When these days are over and memories remain, when children painted rainbows and the sun shone through the rain, I'll remember nurses who stretchered all the pain, and I hope the carers never see a time like this again. And I remember Swansea with nobody about when the shops were closed like Sunday and just the tide went out. And I prayed that time for Boris when he knocked on heaven's door And I thought of voting Tory, which I've never done before. And though the sun is shining now, I've no immediate plans. So I'll write a book on staying in and ways to wash your hands. And I'm still here in lockdown. More weeks of staying in. I'm running out of vodka now, so I've started on the gin. My neighbours are complaining. I've heard them scream and shout with the noise the bins are making when I take the empties out. And I remember Swansea with nobody about when the shops were closed like Sunday and just the tide went out. Some wanted Christmas cancelled, but the piper calls the tune, and hark the herald angels sing wouldn't sound the same in June. So I'll wait here for my vaccine, though I know there's some delay, and I'll order mine on Amazon and get it yesterday. And when all this is over and our fragile world survives, I hope that God is caring now for the ones who gave their lives. And I pray we'll find an answer, for my faith is cast in doubt. But God draws back the heavens, and all the stars come out. And I remember mornings with nobody about when the shops were closed like Sunday, and just the tide went out. Thank you, Max Boyce. Margaret's going to come up and read 2 poems, Jane Clark and Helen Dunmore, yeah?
Oh, okay.
Tammy Yoseloff was one of my MPhil students. I had the privilege for the last 30 years of my life teaching really at postgraduate level some serious writers. And Jane Clark, who I think Margaret will read first, is now one of the major writers in Ireland. I did it, you're supposed to be very PC and I'm not. And so I never met anyone. They would send their poems or their novels in, I would say, and I'd phone them up and I'd say, I like it, I'll take you. Or, sorry, we can't take you. And then when they arrived, we'd find out like who they were. Jane Clark is the most wonderful person. She worked with Gillian Clark, get it? And they had a wonderful relationship. Jane is now a prize-winning poet, and as I say, an absolute stellar figure in the Republic of Ireland. Thank you, Robert. You can say that. This is more difficult.
Yeah.
The second poem is by Helen Dunmore, Margaret and I.
Yeah. Oh, okay. You need to say something. Okay. Jane Clark. Lullaby. Try as he might, he couldn't hush the baby's crying. He carried her out to the yard, showed her pullets pecking at scraps, ewes snuffling oats, calves tucked up in straw, but she wouldn't be consoled. He sat with her on a sack of barley in the barn, lifted a handful that smelled of molasses, and began to speak of reaping, threshing, winnowing grain. Dust and chaff clinging to sweat as they bent to stook sheaves. He hummed the thrashers' thrumming, and by the time he got to the twisters that sent wisps of straw circling like spirits above their heads, she slept. And the other poem by Helen Dunmore, who was a dear friend of ours, a wonderful novelist, poet, short story writer. She wrote for children as well, of course. Sorry. Wrote for children as well. Always based in Bristol and in Cornwall, and who died too soon. This is called The Duration. Here they are on the beach, where the boy played for 15 summers, before he grew too old for French cricket, shrimping and rock pools. Here is the place where he built his dam year after year. See, the stream still comes down just as it did and spreads itself on the sand into a dozen channels. How he enlisted them, those splendid spades, those sun-bonneted girls, furiously shoring up the ramparts. Here they are on the beach, just as they were those 15 summers. She has a rough towel ready for him, The boy was always last out of the water. She would rub him down hard, chafe him like a foal up on its legs for an hour and trembling all angles. She would dry carefully between his toes. Here they are on the beach, the two of them, sitting on the same square of mackintosh, the same tartan rug. Quality lasts. There are children in the water and mothers patrolling the sea's edge, calling them back from the danger zone beyond the breakers. How her heart would stab when he went too far out. Once, she flustered into the water, shouting until he swam back. He was ashamed of her then. Wouldn't speak, wouldn't look at her even. Her skirt was sopped. She had to wring out the hem. She wonders if father remembers. Later, when they'd had their sandwiches, she might speak of it. There are hours yet, thousands by her reckoning.
Thanks, Ray. Helen's the only posthumous contributor to this anthology. I could not do a book without Helen, who was a very dear colleague and major novelist, major poet. Jonathan.
Hi, again, you look similar to you did the last time. This is by Bob Walton, this poem, who some of you will know is just like an amazing person and just like a fantastic writer and really supportive of writers as well. It's a poem called The Nature Table, so it's set in school, and this idea, you know, that you have a table where you kind of go out into the woods and find stuff and put it on the table so you can look at it, the nature table, you know. It's a nice idea. I went to school in Newport, so we didn't have a nature table. We had like a knives table and a weapons table and a controlled substances table, but you know, it's a different poem for a different event. Nature Table. Under the wall display of our painted sunflowers and daisies, splattered like star clusters on a sugar paper sky, the table sat at the back of the classroom, displaying relics we gathered in woods and fields. Chunk of stone, its crystal facets glinting secrets, garland of glossy seagull quills, clutch of hazelnuts in their fuzzy husks, curling leaves of beech, ash, elm and sycamore we'd copy in our drawing books. From an era with so many noughts on the end, our mouths hung open, an ammonite like a fetus sleeping in Jurassic dreams. When Mrs. Jones showed us a spray of acorn in their cups and told of Prince Owain rousing his troops at Pontvadog, we cheered, Umlaen. The day she ran her finger along a sprig of rosemary and spoke of remembrance, a fragrance filled the room and we sighed, sad as willows. And once, when Michael brought in a blackbird's egg he'd found by a hedge, she let me lift it to my eye to peer into the hole he'd blown. It felt so light, I thought I held a bubble of air, and all I could see was the white inner wall of a blue-green world nestling in my hand, perfect, ready to open. I've got one by Paul Henry, I think. Do I? Yes, I do. It's a lovely poem by Paul Henry. Paul Henry was here yesterday doing a creative writing workshop, which I know will have been brilliant, having been in his writing workshop. So if you're lucky enough to have a time machine or build one, you could go back to yesterday and go to his workshop. Unfortunately, it was sold out, so you would have gone to all that extent making a time machine to go back and find out the workshop was sold out. Okay, this poem's called Not Stopping. It's about kind of seeing his son on a train, and it's about distance really from family members. It's a beautiful poem. Not stopping. Unable to visit you down the line, I waited at the station for your train with all the other songs and scenes, gave a wave as you sped through, hoping the gesture might serve, that inside the moment you'd believe you had seen your old man wave as if in a dream, as you sped through, and that this would be enough, accepting good men and bad men share the same name, and that love, however distant along its track, however brief its glance, can forgive, wave back. And this poem, I wrote this poem a few years ago. It's about Capel, which is a village in, you'll all know this, but it's a village in North Wales that was forcibly drowned and evacuated in the 1960s to create a water source for parts of Liverpool. And there are some amazing photographs of people in the village in the last weeks before it was forcibly evacuated, including outside the school. There was this little school, about 20 kids, and the photograph of those 20 kids looking out at you on the last day that the school was open, when they were going to be relocated to other places and lose friendships and grow up with different ideas of home and different places that home would mean. So for me, living in South Wales, with that sense of village communities, that kind of image is really, really impactful. So it started with that photograph. This is last day of school, Capel. 2 rows of them, 2 rows of smiling kids, 2 at the back, alike enough for twins in shirts and ties, like Mam dressed them for this, looks on their faces like the teacher, forceful bosom there behind them, just said, listen, you better sit there and behave, and said it in the voice she says that in. A little girl there in the front row does a vacant look, which seems to say, I'm at that stage of youngness, me, I really don't know where the hell I am, while the boy next to her is squinting like a sniper, and his target's the bloke who made him sit still with these shoes on. 2 rows of children on a sunny day, 2 rows of kids who fretted months away since they were told the news, can't stop believing, however many times the teacher tells them, that when the water comes, it will come quickly and wash the world away.
I do think more married couples should co-curate poetry readings. I think it's the way forward. I am dedicating this one to Margaret. This poem is by Enda Wiley. It's called Magpie, and of course, anyone who knows, I'm obsessed with magpies. And the name Magpie Pied Margot actually derives from Margaret. And the name Megan, which is your granddaughter, and also my daughter, also derives from Margaret. So this one really resonated with me. Oh, by the way, just as a matter of interest, I've always threatened Jonathan Edwards with marrying him, so that way we can hyphenate our names and become Edwards and take over like the Taffia Literati. So that's the secondary.
Only if my Edwards comes first.
So this is Magpie, Enda Wiley. The day builds itself piece by piece. The newt joins the owl, then the porcupine. Quince on its branch bends over a ruby ring, colour seeping across the living room floor, until the jigsaw's yacht sails to its zebra end and we go walking, your hand a small ball in my palm, poised to roll where any adventure lies, hidden in parks, wild gardens, up doorsteps, behind pots. Your eyes, beady berries on Raymond Street's trees, see everything. And then, just there, magpie, magpie. You call to the bird that tussles with the daffodils, that pecks for sparkling light like diamonds through the railings. Our day building and renewing will not stop. Blueberries devoured, cod stew and sleep, the warm milk of waking later the afternoon, becoming a city of wooden blocks up to the ceiling. Only the great moon in the sky and the twinkling star will drag you in song from your industry. Then night has you nestling close to my neck, your lips whispering the day's things softly. Magpie, magpie. Your little fingers pulling at the jade on my chain feel relentless to me like the jay, all ready to steal and fly away. What I love about the poem is she managed to get a young child to eat cod stew. That would never happen. Right, we're going to do an extra poem, so I just got to find it. This one is by Jude Brigley, who is the mother of my my co-editor, Zoe Brigley. It's called Spilt Sugar, and it reminds me of a time where I was utterly traumatised, where I was 8 years old and I was allowed to go to the shop and I bought some milk. And I don't know if this has ever happened to you when you bought bottles of milk. It came through the shopping bag and it cracked. And I was so mortified because I wanted to assert myself as an adult in this scenario. And I cried for hours. This is Spilt Sugar. And it goes like this. Why do your children remember that one time when you lost your rag over spilt sugar? And it was only a gentle smack on the hand. Or the time you promised to buy skates for a birthday, but were distracted at the counter and brought home painting by numbers. Instead, why couldn't your children recall the night you sat up all night to dab with calamine, erupting chickenpox pustules, or how you drove them through the early hours to get them to an important audition, but they did not wave as you drove back with tears scalding your face? Later, as you waited for their flight to land, or wave them off on some wayward journey. Why did they not look back and see you there, waiting, always waiting, with favoured candies, love and handkerchiefs, an encouraging and a practiced smile, sieving the sour from the sweet? And this is my last poem. By the other bard, Gillian Clarke, Missing. I remember Sundays, the effort to be ordinary, the wedding cutlery freed from its velvet and satin, he in his basement workshop, sanding, sawing, singing. She hot in the kitchen, queen of the hour, the day, two-way family favourites to the percussion of pans, steam and sweet aromas, her altar of damask and silver, he an absence, underground, or his name called down the garden when the mower stops. While she carves the roast, I hear his steps on gravel or the basement stairs, his hands under running water, not arrived, sitting down, just his empty chair, and she saying, "Don't wait for your father. Don't let it get cold." Thank you.
It's me again, apparently. Hello. I'm now going to try and find the point. Yes, okay. Okay, yes. I'm going to read this poem by one of my favourite poets. She became one of my favourite poets when she picked one of my poems for a prize just recently. It's weird because it's a poem. It's a mother and the closeness to the child. So there's lots of strangeness about a man reading this poem, but it's a really beautiful poem, I think. So I'll read this. This is by Victoria Kennefic, who's a really brilliant writer from Dublin, and this is called Night Baby. I've never thought about the moon so much, considered it sister-like, watching us learn how to be together. You in my arms, perfect circle of your small mouth pressed to my breast. Lunar light from my phone, my own brain, the moon all shining. It's scary how big the night is, how small we are in it. Think of the others up with us, a night nation of milk and mouths, all fumbling towards each other in the dark, singing. The shape of you, a crescent against me, little planet exploring your phases. Oh, moon, be good to her in the ebb and flow of monthly life. Lick the path clean, but for now, sweet night baby, rock with me. And just one more poem, if I can find it. Yeah. Okay, so this is by Emia Humphreys, who's an amazing writer. And I'm reading this poem because the number of times it's got the word love in it. I realised as I was reading some of these poems, the number of times I picked poems to read which have got the word love in it, which is a good message for any poetry reading to give, isn't it? You know, more love in the world. I mean, within reason, you know, don't use that as advice for Saturday night in the pub, but generally speaking, you know, more love in the world on a spiritual level. This is called From Father to Son. There is no limit to the number of times your father can come to life, and he is as tender as ever he was, and as poor, his overcoat buttoned to the throat, his face blue from the wind that always blows in the outer darkness. He comes towards you, hesitant, unwilling to intrude, and yet driven at the point of love to this encounter. You may think that love is all that is left of him, but when he comes with all his winters and all his wounds. He stands shivering in the empty street, cold and worn like a tramp at the end of a journey, and yet a shape of unquestioning love that you, uneasy and hesitant of the cold touch of death, must embrace. Then, before you can touch him, he is gone, leaving on your fingers a little more of his weariness, a little more of his love.
I'm delighted you read the Emma Humphreys. He was over 100 when he replied to me and agreed to have that poem in the anthology, and he died shortly afterwards. Emma Humphreys should not be forgotten. He is a major Welsh literary figure of the 20th century, and Professor Wyn Thomas in Swansea would argue that he is the outstanding Protestant, nonconformist novelist of the 20th century. Which must be true. I don't argue with Wyn Thomas. Wyn Thomas says it, it's true. Wonderful academic. This is my second granddaughter, Kate, who's 9 going on 23. And this is about how, again, what you try and do when you've got limited time with them, you've got to kind of win them over with something, with love is too obvious. Objects are a good idea. My dad was a car mechanic, which means I know nothing about cars. I know the engines at the front. That's about it. But what we've got from years ago is a couple of mementos, you know, old AA badges and so on. I think Jonathan will recognise the car, the importance of the car in many people's lives. Kate's hair. When they visit, she likes to pick up pots and shells and rearrange the framed family photographs. Can I hold the rabbit, Tucky? Of course she can, but look at those ears. It's a hare. Solid Chrome by Louis Lejeune, standing tall with its thread for screw fixing to the radiator cap of the pre-war Alvis we had sometime in the 50s. We had a sequence of Ford Prefects, Austin Sevens, Morris Minors, and an Alvis. Tadky, tell me why the hare's car had a hole in the floor. And again, I tried to explain about the footwell in the back, how that would have been for her brogues after walking the estate, shooting, or at the hunt. High heels slipped off on the way back from the mayor's ball. But I could park my dinky cars down there and drive them with my toes. I'd stand on the seat exchanging salutes with the AA man on his motorbike, but couch down on worn leather for Radio Luxembourg's top 20 in the dark. All our expeditions were logged by my mother in a book. From Carmarthen, the long way round the Severn, through Gloucester, and up the air balloon to the cousins in Newbury. West to the cousins in Kilgetty and Pulcrochan, through Bankavelin and Llandowro's dark wood, then Llantyg and the county line, where, my father declared, the weather always becomes better in Pembrokeshire. Once to Linton and Lynmouth to see the devastation of the flood. All this, like the hare, has too much weight when I hand it to her. Its long ears crossing at the tips, alert, its haunches and its front paws ready to spring. She needs both hands to hold the Alvis mascot, which must feel dead, like a cold silver thing from a distant life, and will not easily travel across the years to where we are. You always hope that, relationships jump a generation, but it is harder as you, even though you've got an iPhone and an Instagram account, not a TikTok account, but an Instagram account, you do feel like you've moved away from that generation. But it's so useful when you can't work your iPhone and, and your 9-year-old shows you how to do it. The last poem in this anthology is by Graham Davis. Graham's in Brecon now. Graham, the last time we did this gig in Llantrwyd Major, I said, I introduced Graham Davis. The last time he appeared was in the Albert Hall. It's not often you can say that. The next time Graham appears, I think it's going to be in Westminster Abbey. Charity shop. It's not the kind of volume that I buy. The glossy, tasteless, coffee table kind. Small text, big pictures, easy on the eye. Unlock the secrets of your dreaming mind. The sort of book you buy and give away. And yet, perhaps there's more here than there seems. The inside cover's been inscribed this way. Dear Bea, come home and we can share our dreams. Her parents' names, her sisters, and the date, God help them, scarcely 18 months ago. Their tripped, dream-chasing daughter didn't wait before she let this hopeful hardback go. I buy the unread £2.50 tome to give, if not the child, at least the book, a home. One of the things you can do is give one of these books a very good home. In fact, don't buy a book, buy 5. It makes a great present. You've heard 2 wonderful poets reading many wonderful poets, and you don't feel down, do you? It's an uplifting book, and it's for a tremendous cause. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you for the festival for inviting us. Come and talk to us. Come and get a rare 3-signed copy of Where the Birds Sing Our Names. Thank you very much.